tell you about Bellingham, okay. Sorry to interrupt. Hello. This is a continuation of our Tuesday, August 20, 2019 meeting. And this is our afternoon session. So we're going to start in with our various public hearings and public works items. Then we'll do the territorial highway item, the climate action plan discussion. We'll move on to our agenda team requests and work session requests, review of assignments. You have a 4 o'clock time certain with our legal counsel. And then we will be breaking until 5:30 when we will have a public comment session in the evening right here in Harris Hall. So without further ado, let's move to item 12A. And this is and I'll ask Ms. Taylor to come up with, anyone from Cresswell is here, going to come up too? All right, and after I read this, I'll ask Ms. Taylor to introduce our guests from Cresswell. This is our second reading and public hearing on Ordinance PA 1379 in the matter of co-adopting the Cresswell Transportation System Plan, TSP, for application within the urbanizable area outside the city limits, but within the urban growth boundary, and adopting savings and severability clause, and co-adopting transportation policies to implement the updated TSP goals as text amendments to the comprehensive plan. The applicant is the city of Cresswell. With us to introduce this is Becky Taylor, Senior Transportation Planner for Lane County. Welcome, Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Chair Sorensen. Commissioners, with me today is Maddie Phillips, City of Cresswell Planner. The City of Cresswell, their council, has already adopted the package before you today, which is the city's updated Transportation System Plan, or TSP, and their transportation policies. Today, the city is requesting that Lane County co-adopt this package, and Lane County co-adopts packages like this for all of the cities for applicability to the urban transition area, which is the area outside of city limits, but within the city's urban growth boundary. The Lane County Planning Commission has screened this proposal for you as well to ensure consistency with applicable regulations. The Planning Commission also held a public hearing, and to date we have heard no public objections or concerns with the proposal before you today. The Planning Commission does not rubber stamp anything. They asked a lot of technical questions, but they were satisfied with all of the information. And the Planning Commission recommended that you adopt the package as presented without any revisions. This package is processed as a comprehensive plan amendment, which requires a public hearing. In the next slide, I'll reference the approval criteria, and then after staff presents, then we'll ask you to open a public hearing, at which time then you'll hear from Maddie, the applicant, hear any public comments, you can ask questions, hear any rebuttal from staff or the applicant, and then you'll close the record and begin deliberations. We would like your action today if possible, and the action options and related motions are provided in your agenda packet.
Do you want me to read these procedural rules, or how do you want to handle that?
When you open up the public hearing is when you need to read the procedures. Thank you, Chair Sorensen. So just for some background, a transportation system plan is a long-range plan that sets the community's vision for the transportation system over a 20-year period. That vision includes both transportation improvement projects and also transportation policies. And Maddie's going to be telling you about the city's vision and highlighting the projects specific to the urban transition area. But just so you know, the legal requirement, TSPs are required of cities and the county by state law. Oregon Administrative Rule 660. Section 12, as presented in this slide here. The law is very complicated and prescriptive about what a TSP may contain. It is a major exercise, and local TSPs are often dependent on funding from ODOT to hire a consultant to develop all of the required analysis. The law also clarifies that the TSP is adopted as part of the comprehensive plan, and local governments are required to adopt within their planning jurisdiction. Lane County's planning jurisdiction is the urban transition area, and as stated in your draft ordinance and included in your packet, co-adoption again is for applicability outside city limits but within the urban growth boundary. This is a legislative amendment to the comprehensive plan, and that requires compliance with all of the statewide planning goals. We've reviewed the plan against all of the rules and find compliance, and findings of compliance with the approval criteria are included in your agenda packet. It's Exhibit B to the draft ordinance. That concludes my presentation. Again, here's the agenda for this item, asking you to open a public hearing, close the hearing and deliberate, and then your decision options. So now I will ask you to read your script, Chair Sorensen, to open the hearing.
So I've read the agenda item and the title. Now I'm going to explain the rules of the hearing. The proposed lane code amendments are subject to applicable criteria identified in lane code 12.005, 12.050, and 16.400. Today's date is Tuesday, August 20, 2019. The order of proceedings of this hearing will be to first hear a report by staff, followed by public testimony, then additional comments by staff. Testimony must be directed toward the approval criteria believed to apply to the decision. Parties are encouraged to raise issues with sufficient specificity to allow the board to fully address the issue as part of any decision. As part of the day's proceedings, the board may continue the public hearing to a date and time certain. Because this is a legislative process, the record is technically open until the board makes a decision. However, early submissions are encouraged to allow the board time to review the material. Following a public hearing on this matter, the board may make a decision, and the board's decision may be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals in accordance with Chapter 197. At this time, I will call for any commissioner abstentions due to conflicts of interest or biases. I see none. At this time, I'll call for any challenges to the board's qualifications to hear this matter. I see none. At this time, we will now open the public hearing, and we will ask to have people testify if they wish to. I guess in sequence, it'll be the applicant first and other public testimony. Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'd first like to start by saying thank you to county staff for their incredible support in bringing this material forward to you, and also to folks from Cresswell who are in our audience today. It's a pretty significant step, as Becky mentioned earlier, for a community of 5,455 people to bring forward a comprehensive plan amendment like this, and you'll hear a bit more about what's happening in Cresswell this afternoon, so I appreciate your time and attention. Cresswell's transportation system plan looked over many, many different issues. Our last plan was developed in 1998, and as you might be aware, the community of Cresswell has grown significantly in the last 3 decades. In fact, our roadways, when we looked at this document to determine whether or not it was ripe for revision, staff asked our city council whether they could locate their roadway on the map that was included in the plan, and about half of the councilors were unable to find their road because the roads are new. So in fact, I thought I'd touch on some of the high points of the plan because you've got it in your packet, and there's an incredible amount of detail. I'd welcome any questions. But Cresswell's transportation system plan really focused on 4 major areas of revision. The first has to do primarily with economic development. We have significant employment lands that front state facilities, and those state facilities have had some ambiguity about what direction they'd move in, how they'd be updated, what kind of investment might be made in them. And those roadways include Highway 99, and what is now Cloverdale Road, has always been Cloverdale Road, but formerly Highway 222 that runs east-west through Cresswell. And what we know is that a plan of this nature is an overarching look at how those facilities work within the context of our system. And we recognize them as very significant and important for our economic development opportunities of jobs. Secondly is infrastructure modernization. A lot of our roads are old and they are in desperate need of investment and support. We're looking at 21 road miles within the city, and there are a significant number, as you've seen in the plan, of roads that require improvement, both not only for upgrade for vehicle use, but because of traffic increases, but also for modernization to meet multimodal standards, so for complete street opportunities. And what we tried to do in this plan was actually triangulate those improvements with some of our water and sewer investments. We know once we open up a street, it sure is nice not to have to do it again. Thirdly, as I kind of alluded to earlier, facility utilization. We recognize that many of the roadways in town have previously been utilized for access to downtown, but as our residential population grows, there is a higher demand for walking and biking ability on many of our streets. Many of our streets have previously had very high speed limits, and those areas of concern we've highlighted in the plan. In particular, we've partnered with Lane County to apply for grants for items like safe routes to school and opportunities to partner, so that when folks, especially road users, don't necessarily know where our jurisdiction begins and ends. As we leave city limits, that urban transition area is not, it's not signed. So we tend to look at those facilities as a complete trip from someone's home to an elementary school or a high school, for example. And one of the primary areas that we partnered with Lane County on for that Safe Routes to School effort was on 6th Street and Niblock Lane are both two good examples of that. But further, you'll see in some of the maps, in particular, we've identified several projects within the plan on page 83 regarding Harvey Road, Dale Cooney Road, all of which are regional connectors. And what we know about those regional connectors is that they're gateways to Cresswell. So they're very much important to the community. And third, or fourth rather, is a common vision for those state facilities I alluded to in item 1. We know that these roads, Highway 99, 222 Cloverdale Road, are very important to us, but we wanted to make sure that as a community we express those as a common vision with our state partners. What we know about our facilities may not always be of the highest echelon or highest opportunity for their investment. And our hope is that this plan offers a great opportunity for Cresswell to partner with the county to develop perhaps a greater vision around some of those corridors and really start to unpack some of the ways that these district highways in particular are of value to small, particularly rural communities outside of the metro area. So we've highlighted Highway 99 as you've seen in the plan, as a very significant opportunity for us to collaborate in creating a common vision. If you might, next slide, thanks. I've provided the roadway jurisdiction map here. If you look up to the right here, or to your left, you'll see, and it's unfortunately not as well defined as I'd hoped, but those green teal lines that are outside of the community in the gray. So the gray is all county area, the white is area that's within the Creswell urban growth boundary. And as you'll see, some of the county facilities actually remain within our growth boundary, areas that are still unincorporated. That we imagine or assume over the course of perhaps the next planning period will at some point urbanize. Cresswell does not have any expectation of annexation, but we do welcome annexation when and if it's feasible for landowners. And there are some facilities that as they develop, for example, Niblock Lane, which is just north, in the northwest quadrant of the city, you'll notice that there's a large blank empty space. That's actually where Cresswell High School and Crest Lane Elementary School are. We imagine that as those areas begin to urbanize and as those roads become more frequently used, that there will be discussions with the county and opportunities to partner as to how those roads will be upgraded and improved. And then finally, so as to attempt not to overwhelm the commissioners, I've provided a map that only shows projects within the urban transition area, of which there are many, predominantly focused on those roads that serve major activity centers or connect folks from their homes to school, or have particular touch points, meaning they would be a referral opportunity for the city to refer to the county when and if those roads ever see improvement due to private development or otherwise. So in conclusion, commissioners, I'd like to say thank you again for the opportunity to bring this amendment before you. Our city council was extremely proud to bring this document forward as an expression of how we'd like to see our transportation investments move forward. It's one of the many prongs of infrastructure improvement that we're hoping to move forward with over the next 10, 20, possibly longer years. And we look for any and all opportunity to work with the county in making those visions come to life. So thank you for that.
Great, thank you very much. Are there other people that want to testify in favor of the? No one signed up, okay. And is there anybody that has not signed up that wants to testify in favor? Okay, and is there anybody that wants to testify in any other way? Okay, and seeing none, we'll ask staff if you want to make any comments before we close the hearing and get to a board discussion.
Thank you, Chair Sorensen. I would just assure the commission that adopting this plan does not obligate Lane County or the city to fund and construct any of these improvements. Adopting this plan demonstrates that you agree there's a need, and this is the first step, very, very important step to being able to secure external funding sources. State and federal grants often require, is your project shown in a transportation system plan? And as Maddie mentioned, this is really an opportunity for us to align our priorities and collaborate around our priorities.
Okay, very good. At this time, then, I will be closing the hearing, and to guide the board's discussion on this, we have the following options. One is to adopt the ordinance as written. Second is to direct staff to modify the ordinance. 3 is to, or 4 is to continue the hearing to a time, date certain. Or to direct staff to prepare an ordinance denying the request. And of course, the applicant and county staff would like us to adopt the ordinance as written today, which is what I think we will be doing. Commissioner Buck?
I'll move to approve the second reading and public hearing for ordinance number PA 1379 as presented.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved to approve the ordinance as presented, ordinance PA 1379. It's been moved by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Burney. Further discussion? Commissioner Farr?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of quick questions, but first I'd like to welcome Mayor Richard Zettervall. Thank you for being with us today, Mayor, making the long journey up here for an afternoon visit. Thank you. I just have a quick question. I'm looking at the urban growth boundary, and I see a lot of open space inside of the urban growth boundary. Out Knee-Block Lane, for instance, is to the north of Knee-Block, there's a lot of open space. Is that zoned residential predominantly, or is it mixed-use zoning?
That area is outside of the city's urban growth boundary. Knee-Block is the urban growth boundary.
That is, okay.
Yeah.
And, sorry, that is Knee-Block the urban growth boundary then?
Yes.
Okay. So anything north of that. Even then, a lot of land inside toward the center. Do you have how much residential do you have available that's not developed at this point?
Well, Commissioner, it may be a little bit premature for me to provide a specific number as we've just recently completed or are going through the deliberations around our housing needs analysis, but we do know we have a significant need for housing based on our population estimates. The area you're referring to in the center of the community, some of that is commercial, and some of those areas actually speak to the point around point number 1 that I brought up earlier, which is around economic development. We do have a few industrially zoned properties along Highway 99 in particular that run through the center of the community, one of which is to the north, up near Martin Road, and the other is towards the south, which some have referred to as Bald Knob, was the last user as a former mill site. And it's about 44 acres that has highway frontage, I-5, in case you know anyone.
You know you have a beautiful town. I know that.
We do, thanks.
Well, thanks very much. And it looks like there's a great deal of school space right inside the urban growth boundary, inside the city limits. What a ideal place to live. Oh, my gosh. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Burney?
Mayor, it's nice to see you again. This is a bit more formal than when we met. I just want to say that for a community of Cresswell's size, I am so impressed with the planning and the thought and the presentation. And I completely will support as best I can both your district's commissioner and your attempts to generate resources to, in fact, make some of this a reality.
I'm also very pleased to see you here, and after all this work that you've taken so long to get together, and it will, I think, kind of propel the city into being able to work on a state level to advocate for the needs of your community. And as you mentioned, we have 99 and the railroad coming straight through the center of your town, which in that open space we see in the middle creates a lot of challenges for you to get infrastructure across those two state boundaries, and we need to be able to work with the state on economic development and infrastructure so that those areas can bloom. And I look forward to working with you on those as well. And the area, as you mentioned, under knee block on the top left, that's school land. So it looks like it's empty and available, but it's not necessarily. So you really need some land, to grow, because you're growing like the rest of our small communities. So I look forward to hearing more about those housing needs when they come out as well. And I'll be there to support you in any way I can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Buck just touched on the one question I was going to have for you, and that is, we've had some public comment about the need for a housing bond whereby the county would ask the taxpayers of Lane County to pay taxes for purposes of a low-income housing bond, so that people that currently don't have access to housing would have greater access. I know that the whether or not we would do that is kind of up to the commissioners and whether there's public support for that. But if there was, is there something connected, maybe not in the transportation plan, but in some other kind of state plan or some kind of community plan that you do that identifies housing needs?
Absolutely, Commissioner. The city actually, and I alluded to it in response to Commissioner Farr's question, the city actually this week, Thursday, and the following Monday with City Council will be discussing some work we recently did to address housing needs analysis. And so we do have some preliminary numbers that are associated with that, but for context, we're a community of 5,455. And our community is slated to grow by about 2,021 people in the next 20 years. And so for additional context, which you'll hear in my next presentation, is that we've grown by 3,000 people since 1990. So we're certainly on that track of needing to provide additional housing options for folks.
Yeah. Is the housing analysis, is that something required by the state?
Yes.
And what is that called, that program, that requirement?
It's the housing needs analysis is
Housing needs analysis.
and it's a response to Division 10 of the
Okay,
statewide.
very good. Well, if we do move forward on that, we certainly want to make sure that the county and all of the various subdivisions of the county are properly represented and how the money is fairly allocated. So, thank you so much. I think we're done, except for our continued discussion and vote. Any further discussion? Okay, so we have a motion, right? We already did that. So motion by Commissioner Buck and seconded by Commissioner Burney. Further discussion? Seeing none, we will now go to a vote. This being an ordinance, we'll ask our acting county administrator to poll the commissioners.
Chair Sorensen, thank you very much. Commissioner Farr?
Aye.
Commissioner Burney?
Aye.
Commissioner Buck?
Aye.
Chair Sorensen?
Aye.
With Commissioner Bosevich excused, the motion passes 4-0.
4-0 with Commissioner Bosevich excused. So the ordinance is adopted. Thank you very much. Don't go anywhere, because item 12B is second reading and public hearing on ordinance PA 1378 in the matter of co-adopting amendments to the Cresswell Comprehensive Land Use Plan, Section 3, related to Goal 1, citizen involvement, and Goal 2, land use planning, file number 509 PA 1905309, and Ms. Lindsay Eichner, Senior Planner with Lane County Public Works Land Management Division, is here, along with Madeline Phillips, Planner for the City of Cresswell. Welcome to both of you.
Good afternoon, Chair Sorensen, Commissioners. I'm not going to go into the full background of why we're here today, because I feel like that happened at the last introduction, except that we're moving on to a different topic. We're reviewing the amendments to Goals 1 and Goals 2 of the Cresswell Comprehensive Plan. This item has been taken to our Planning Commission, and they had a unanimous recommendation for approval. It's also been approved by the City Planning Commission and the City Council. We're, as staff, recommending approval of co-adopting the amendments as well. And I will hand the presentation over to Maddie.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners, again for the time today to review some of the work that Cresswell has been diligently working on. And again, thank you to county staff for facilitating and supporting our efforts to bring it before you today. What we are, if you want to change the slide there, thanks. What we're talking about today for your review are amendments to our comprehensive plan, Goals 1 and 2. Goal 1, you might recall, revolves around citizen involvement. What we know about our comprehensive plan and the work that we've done to update it, I already highlighted the growth rates and all the statistics that I probably should share today. That said, we've saw significant growth from years 2004 to 2007 on the order of about 4% year over year. So we've seen a huge growth of our residential population. And what we know about those folks is that many of them, nearly 80% of them, work in Eugene Springfield, and so they leave town every day. And it's been incredibly challenging for us to reach that population of folks, because when they come home, similar to most of us who work during the day, the last thing you'd like to do is go sit through a public meeting or an open house.
You're welcome at our evening public comment this evening.
I appreciate that, Commissioner, very much. As someone interested in the public process, I most certainly might, but that may be above and beyond the request that we make of our public.
That's a no, sir.
In knowing that, we have taken several steps to try to reach folks who are traditionally inaccessible at those hours of the day by bringing a lot of our public engagement online. We've pursued a virtual open house and a number of other avenues that have helped not only bring information to people as we are obligated to by regulation under statewide Goal 1, but also to get feedback from folks. Many of the platforms that we've used have been interactive, have survey elements to them, and I'll show a highlight of some of the work we did around Goal 1 in a moment. Further, Goal 2 Goal 2 work revolves around land use planning. So it is the framework by which we create zones within the community. Our comprehensive plan was last updated in 1982, and the community has grown both in size and sophistication in that time. And I'll kind of highlight some of the ways that we've changed or amended our Goal 2 work to reflect the way that we regulate land within the city limits. You'll see on the, thank you. You'll see on the left, I won't click on it today, but it will certainly be available to you if you type in Cresswell TSP Virtual Open House. There is a forum that we used that allows folks to thumb through what would traditionally be put up on poster boards at an open house and provide input in a variety of ways. That was really effective during our work in the comprehensive plan or in the transportation system plan. Further, I brought copies, but we realized that not everyone in Cresswell might be as tech savvy as would access a virtual open house, so we created an insert in our local Cresswell Chronicle newspaper, which essentially shows a number of the key points that I highlighted in our last public hearing, and provides folks with opportunities to engage with the city staff and ask questions about some of the work we've been doing. Those are just some examples of best practices that the city's adopted and would like to have seen included in our comprehensive plan as a guiding principle. Here's a slide that shows an excerpt from that transportation virtual open house indicating areas of crash data history, so little dots that represent different places where folks have gotten in accidents, and further providing information along the side. When this virtual open house was live, so it was live for about 3 weeks, we had a little tab that had a series of questions that would help us gather more information and feedback about how folks reacted to that particular item. And further, which is gaining popularity, us planners, we can't let go of the dots exercise. So we've created a virtual dot exercise, which allows folks to place little pins on a map, which folks have gotten very comfortable with using Google and other interactive tools that way, and provide us with small excerpts as to why they are concerned about that intersection or what they'd like to see improved. We had over 180 dots that were posted, which is 10 times more than we would have seen in a traditional open house event. And then further, moving on to Goal 2 work, as I mentioned, the community has grown significantly, and as a result, so too has our management practice of land within the community. In 1982, we have a land use plan that diagram that specifies 3 different zones, 4 actually, including parks. That said, we've seen a growth or a sophistication around overlay zones that have created areas of the community that are either for a specific purpose, such as areas around Emerald Valley Golf Resort that were designed for sort of the co-usage of area for recreation purposes and housing. Similarly, we've seen a significant increase in understanding of our risks to natural hazards, and so those are now part of our zoning map. Further, we've seen, as you mentioned, Commissioner, about the need for or interest in providing more housing opportunities, a desire to see densities, and perhaps sophistication in our commercial code around what kinds of commercial are located where and with what externalities understood or considered. And then thirdly, stewardship of natural resources. We've done a local wetlands inventory, among other things, that help us regulate for sensitive lands. So those are all captured in the work around Goal 2. And we hope that that is a way for us to continue to move forward as to how we might use land efficiently and effectively in Cresswell. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with you about that.
So are we ready, Ms. Eichner, for me to read all of the procedures for the public hearing? Okay.
So would, and I believe we still need to read the agenda title into the record as
Okay.
well.
Okay, so at this time, I will begin this item by reading the agenda title again. This is in the matter of co-adopting amendments to the Cresswell Comprehensive Plan. Section 3 related to Goal 1, Citizen Involvement, and Goal 2, Land Use Planning, file number 509PA 19-05309. And we've heard the presentation by Ms. Eichner. I'd like to explain that the proposed Lane County amendments are subject to applicable criteria identified in Lane Code 12.005, 12.050, and 16.400. Today's date continues to be until midnight, Tuesday, August 20, 2019. We will, having heard from staff, we'll have a public testimony, and then we'll have additional comments by staff. Testimony must be directed toward the approval criteria and criteria believed to apply to the decision. Parties are encouraged to raise issues with sufficient specificity to allow the board to fully address the issue as part of any decision. As part of today's proceedings, the board may continue the public hearing to a date, time certain. Because this is the legislative process, the record is technically open until the board makes a decision. However, early submissions are encouraged to allow the board time to review the material. Following a public hearing on this matter, the board may make a decision, and the board's decision may be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals in accordance with ORS Chapter 197. At this time, I call for disclosure of any commissioner abstentions due to conflicts of interest or biases. I see none. At this time, I will call the audience to ask if there are any challenges to the board's qualifications to hear this matter. I see none. At this time, I will now open the public hearing. And we've heard from the city of Cresswell. Is there anyone signed up to testify? Is there anyone signed up to testify against or otherwise? Seeing nothing further for requests to testify, I will now ask if there's any further comments from Ms. Eichner.
No further comments.
No further comments. At this time, I will now close the public hearing, and I will now turn to the board for various options for board discussion, which include adopting the ordinance as written, which has been requested, direct staff to modify the ordinance, close the hearing, continue the hearing to a date and time certain, or direct staff to prepare an ordinance denying the request. At this time, I'll turn to Commissioner Buck for a motion.
I would move to approve the second reading and public hearing for ordinance number PA 1378 as presented.
Is there a second?
Do you want to do this one?
I'll second that. Thank you.
It's been moved by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Farr to approve the ordinance 1378 as presented. Further discussion from commissioners. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of, just to highlight things that you said in the previous agenda item that link with this. Cresswell has grown from about 2,500 to about 5,500 in the last, well, since 1990. I grew up in Tillamook, which since I moved there prior to that, has grown exactly 0 in that same amount of time. So, Cresswell is now bigger than Tillamook. But that being said, you're projecting about a 40% increase over the course of the next 20 years. Now, one thing that I'd like to raise a flag on from time to time that we don't think about or we don't publicly discuss too frequently is the fact that we will experience climate refugees during that 20 years as people decline living in places where fire may engulf their town, for instance, or where the water availability becomes less, water becomes less available. More people are going to want to move this direction. And Cresswell, being in its location, is a prime place for people to kind of put as a pinpoint on their map. I'm not raising an alarm right now, but that is something to consider for the future as we look to what our needs are for the future. The people, more than the kids graduating from our high school and more than the overflow from the Eugene, Springfield metropolitan area, people are going to want to move to your community. So it's just something to keep on the back burner. You know, the climate refugeeism is going to be a reality. We will be seeing people moving at even greater numbers than we've seen in the past. So, thank you. Thanks for being here today, Maddie. It's a great presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, further comments? I was going to mention, Commissioner Farr kind of beat me to it on this, but I was raised in North Bend, Oregon, which also has had a relatively slow growth. I mean, it has had some growth. 1980 population of North Bend was 9,779. 2018 estimate is 9,765. So not a whole lot of change. And so when we looked at the Portland State, at least I've looked at the Portland State County and the 12 cities within Lane County population estimates that Portland State does, the unincorporated portion of Lane County and the small city portion of Lane County has really grown a lot. And Cresswell is not unique in the sense that its population has really grown a lot. It's unique in the sense that for one community of 2,500 people, in my frame of reference, to now being the size that it's going to be is pretty phenomenal, quite a bit of growth. And I think your comment about the city councilors looking at the map and not seeing the road they lived on because it wasn't there when the map was made really points that out, that there's a lot of growth occurring now. And they're coming for lots of reasons. I mean, we know they're coming because the housing costs in the Eugene Springfield area are high. We know they're willing to pay that time and distance in commuting. We know that the housing prices are lower in Cresswell, but they're coming for lots of reasons, and retirement, climate, refugee, lots of reasons. Sir, yes.
I'm married to a Maddie, so it's been a little different. She has 3 E's in her.
Oh.
Yeah. You guys know what that means, right? Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I will obviously vote to support this and move things forward, but I'd just like to make a couple of comments, and this is the time. I hope I don't bore you. One is the chair said that we're looking at a housing bond and said it will all be low income. I'm going to push for the missing middle to be a part of that, and I'm going to push for there to be mechanisms to incent home ownership opportunities from working people as you think that one through. I also want to state that I really agree with Commissioner Farr's point, except I think that we already are experiencing climate refugees. We already are experiencing people moving, at least to the metro area, in retirement. We already are experiencing people moving here for housing, which is actually relatively inexpensive if you're talking about Los Angeles or Southern California or Northern California or what have you. So my only word of caution is that I think Cresswell has the ability to control its future and to define how large or how small a community it wants to be, but there will be external pressures to build and to grow significantly more than the projections that you provided. I may be wrong, but I think that's the case.
Okay, I think we are now ready to vote. We have a motion made by Commissioner Buck, second by Commissioner Farr, to approve the ordinance as presented. And this being an ordinance, we'll ask our acting county administrator to poll the board.
Thank you, Chair Sorensen. Commissioner Farr.
Aye.
Commissioner Burney.
Aye.
Commissioner Buck.
Aye.
Chair Sorensen.
Aye. What is the vote total?
The vote total with the excused absence of Commissioner Bosevich is 4-0.
4-0. Thank you very much. And and the ordinance is adopted. Thanks very much for all your help. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Mayor and
Thank you.
citizens. Thanks. It's a friendly town. Okay, we are up to item 12C, ordinance number 19-08 order number 19-08-20-19 in the matter of approving the territorial highway, Gillespie Corners, Town of Lorraine corridor plan and design concept, authorizing staff to prepare orders of necessity for right-of-way for each phase. With us to discuss this is Peggy Kepler, Lane County Engineer, part of the Lane County Public Works Department, and welcome, Ms. Kepler.
Thank you, Chair Sorensen and Commissioners. It's good to be here today. I'm going to provide you with an overview of the territorial highway project between Gillespie Corners and the Town of Lorraine. This is a major milestone. Your actions today will move this 7-year planning effort into final design. And I want to say thank you to Becky. She has been here for most of that 7 years, working with the communities and the stakeholders, and done an excellent job. Territorial Highway is a historical highway. It's been around since the 1850s. It's cherished by the community and the neighbors along the road. Yet neighbors and users have long voiced their concern about the safety and condition of the road. The road is narrow and has no shoulders. There are areas of landslides and flooding. Your action is a critical step to advancing the project to improve this facility. We're asking the board to act on the proposed board order included in your agenda packet, which would approve the design concept, which is the requirement of the lane manual and has been vetted through the stakeholders and recommended by the Transportation Advisory Committee. The design concept is attached to the board order, and it's listed as the Territorial Highway, Gillespie Corners, Town of Lorraine, corridor plan and design concept. And this will also authorize the staff to advance the plans and project by preparing detailed design drawings. After my presentation, I welcome questions from the board and request that your action today would be to advance the project to begin construction in the summer of 2020. That's less than a year away. After extensive community involvement efforts, stakeholders and community members approved the design concepts that include adding 6-foot shoulders to both sides of the road where there are currently none, raising the bridges that are currently deficient and experiencing flooding, and realigning sharp curves and stabilizing the roadway where there have been landslides, and particularly there at Stony Point. And reconstructing the roadway to provide a smooth traveling surface, which is currently in poor condition. The community preferred an alignment that most closely followed the existing roadway to minimize the property impacts and encourages vehicles to drive slower. This slide, I think we're a little ahead. Back one more. There you go. This slide shows the drawings that the community worked through in public meetings in 2014. 3 alignments were considered, each with varying degrees of curvature. The community preferred the lowest design speed for each of them. These curves will very likely have chevrons and curve warning signs with advisory speeds of 35 miles per hour. Reducing vehicle speeds is a community priority for improving safety. We're also considering integrating other safety features, such as wider and brighter pavement markings, centerline rumble strips, guardrails, speed feedback signs, and other warning signs. Board approval of this community preferred design will enable staff to advance the project design toward reconstructing Territorial Highway from Gillespie Corners, which is milepost 32, to the intersection of Territorial and Cottage Grove Lorraine Highway. in Lorraine. This is the milepost 37.7, so it's about 5.7 miles long. The construction is phased over several years. Starting with summer, next summer, we'll be working on the landslide, mitigating the landslide at Stony Point. That's about 1.3 miles there that we'll do next year. Then in 2021, we will come in, raise and widen the bridges near Gillespie Corners and reconstruct the roadway from Gillespie Corners to Easy Acres Road. Then in 2022, we will construct the Easy Acres to Ham Road. Then in 2023, we will start the final construction from the south end to the city of Lorraine. There's a lot of work to do to adhere to this schedule, and your action today is essential to meeting this timeline. We have to complete the National Environmental Protection Agency documentation. This is also known as the NEPA documentation. We have construction plans and specifications to prepare, and we also have to acquire right-of-way. All of the design options that were presented did include widening the road, and it was accepted by the neighbors and the community in the area, but acquiring right-of-way takes some time. There is a feeling that this project is long overdue. Community members have been working with the county and state staff since 2012, assessing the problems and identifying solutions that meet the needs of the users. The Territorial Highway Corridor Plan and Design Concept was accepted in 2016. Then in 2017, House Bill 2017 directed ODOT to transfer jurisdiction of the highway to the county. This included providing funding for the reconstruction between Gillespie Corners and Lorraine. On June 20th this year, a public meeting was held to update the stakeholders on the project. About 80 people attended, and there was a celebratory feeling to the meeting. The stakeholders continue to support the 2016 design concepts. In July, the TRAC met. They held a public hearing on the preferred designment, and they approved this to move forward with their recommendation to the board. This design approval process will enable us to advance to the next step of working directly with the property owners and stakeholders to develop the details necessary for construction, including the right-of-way needs. As noted, the design includes that widening to provide the 6-foot shoulders and realigning the roadway to soften the sharp curves. This requires the additional right-of-way. There is a prescribed process for right-of-way acquisition. While staff will work with property owners to achieve an agreeable sale without using our power of attorney, the process does require that we prepare for that potential. The recommended design concept does not include alternatives, and sometimes property owners are not always available to sign the documents. The process of eminent domain allows us to continue to move forward with the construction. Your agreement today approves the design concept and establishes the authority to identify the right-of-way needs with each phase of construction. Before that phase of construction is bid, staff will prepare an actual order of necessity, which will be brought to the board for approval. That the order of necessity will identify each of the property takings that are necessary and the property owners, and allow us to move forward to negotiate with them, do the appraisals, and purchase the property, acquire the property. This is the last step alternative to use our eminent domain power. It's rarely used, but it's best to be understood with this project, particularly at this size of a project. This is a $20 million investment, and the time that it takes to design, prepare the plans, do the negotiations is significant. And so we just wanted to make sure that you understood that not only moving forward with the design meant that we would be working with property owners. That's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. Boy, this is a happy day for a lot of us that have been involved in this for many, many years, from the tragedies and to the present more pleasant getting things moved along. So questions by commissioners, comments? Commissioner Farr?
Thank you. Not much to say other than great work, and the community involvement is really outstanding. We received testimony from 4 different people this morning, well, from 3 plus 1 whose testimony was read, from Claire Roth and Richard Hughes. Dr. Rob Zako was here, and Steve Piercy spoke for Sue Walling this morning, all in favor of what you presented today. A great project. Anybody who drives that road knows that it's frightening to drive, let alone ride. So it's fantastic that we as a county have taken over that stretch of highway, and as the county seems to operate, we are taking immediate advantage and moving forward directly. So good work moving us forward. Thank you.
I'm also really proud that of all the stakeholder interest and energy around this. You know, I grew up in Veneta. We were talking about this morning, and I remember riding my bike and walking across Territorial all the time as a kid, and I even had a friend that lived next door to me that we would always go and recycle our cans and get candy at the grocery store across the street, you know, almost every day, as much as we could, because we're kids and we love candy, right? So this is a really wonderful final approval and move to get this body of work going. Thank you for all your work, Becky, for all these years of work on this particular road. I know it involved a variety of different groups from the state down to the people living on the street. And this is the accumulation of that work. So I'm just really proud of everybody's involvement and energy to get this to this place. And it would be my pleasure to be able to move to approve order number 19-08-20-19 as presented.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Buck, second by Commissioner Burney to approve order 19-08-20-
Far, not Bernie.
Oh, Farr, I'm sorry. I was looking at you. I should have
I haven't
mentioned.
spoken yet.
So it's been moved by Commissioner Buck, second by Commissioner Farr to approve order 19-08-20-19. Further discussion, Commissioner Burney.
I would just like to state that I'm impressed with the professionalism and persistence with which I understand this has been pursued. I am impressed with the realness of the community involvement as opposed to checking a box that is evident, and I'm proud to be sitting here at a moment of action as I'm privileged to do with so many, it seems, long-standing directions that this county has been working through, and we are in a moment in multiple areas of action, so thank you very much.
Yeah, Territorial Highway was built when Oregon was a territory, and its successor in many ways was Highway 99, and its successor in many ways is Interstate 5. And so as more and more traffic moved off of Territorial and onto 99 and onto 5, the needs of Territorial were forgotten. And I think it's pretty important that we've taken this state highway, which really did not function as a state highway. It was really for local purposes that it was being used, and it's been returned to the county as a county road. And now, because we've put all this hard work into it, and you guys have done all the hard work, but a lot of work has gone into the realization of all the competing interests, and that's really one of the things to celebrate today, a win along the way toward the construction and and the use. So thank you so much for all of your work and for all the people that are not here who did participate in many ways. So at this time, we will move to a vote.
Mr. Chair, just one,
more
just a
comments?
slight lament, if I may, that Commissioner Bozievich isn't here because he did participate deeply in the process that brought us to this point of action that Commissioner Burney just mentioned. And it's particularly poignant that he wasn't here for some of the action that we took this morning, which all had his thumbprints on it. But if Commissioner Bozievich is happening to listen or when he hears this, recognition that he did participate at length and in depth in this process.
Okay. Further comments before we go to a vote? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 4-0. Commissioner Bozievich excused, and the order is adopted. Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Okay. We go from the very local to the very big picture. So we're going up to item 12D. This is our discussion on the approach for developing a climate action plan. Dan Hurley and others are here. Mr. Hurley, if you could introduce your colleagues, that'd be great.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm joined here today by Michael Johns. He is our Division Manager for General Services, which encompasses fleet and facilities and animal services. And I'm also joined by Angie Marzano. She is a waste reduction specialist in the Waste Management Division.
Okay, how do you want to structure this?
All right, I'll take you through the proposal in the packet and then ask for your feedback, if that sounds all right.
Okay?
Okay. So today I'm seeking your direction on the approach that's in your board packet for developing a climate action plan. In our last meeting with this group, we discussed the best management practices that the county has been employing for many years in areas of facilities, fleet, procurement, and materials management. And we're excited to begin this work based on your past direction. We have very talented staff here that have experience in education in this field. All three of us have masters in either environmental studies, sustainability, and policy analysis. In addition to that, Michael has done quite a bit of work over the years reducing the emissions from our fleet. Angie has done past work at eWeb. She led their work on their emissions inventory. So, and also led the Bring Rethink Business program, which has climate elements in that. So excited to have this great staff to help with this project, but also recognizing that we will need additional resources for this project. So in your board packet, I have some thoughts on that, and I'll get to that as I go through here. Since embarking on this project, I've spoken with a few different community groups. I've attended part of the 350 Eugene's town hall meeting, where there were several hundred people in attendance, or at least a few hundred people, and fielded several emails from constituents, your constituents, that are interested on this topic, and a wide range of interests, ranging from things such as the timing of traffic signals to reduce idling, to large issues such as forest practices at the state and federal level. Recognizing that this climate action work could be very broad, I'm recommending a two-phased approach, and I'll get to that. But I think people need to recognize that some of the climate change policies that people would like to pursue are in our direct control with our county operations, but some would require extensive collaboration with the cities. I think a lot of people aren't aware that the county doesn't have overarching control over city policies. Things such as land use and transportation planning are within the realm of the cities, and unless they're guided by other state or federal policy. So there's some awareness and education that needs to happen of what this climate action plan could entail and what control it could have. Then there are also some policies that are of interest by the community that are clearly beyond the county's ability to directly control, and that the county's role may be only advocating or trying to influence policy at the state and federal level, such as forest practices. With an awareness of the broad scope that climate action plan could entail, and also recognizing the urgency for action on climate policy, I'm recommending this two-phased approach. So the first phase would be more internally focused so that we can move quickly on the things that we can directly control. And then the second phase would be a more community collaborative approach where we can work through some of the broader issues that are going to take more time. So for that first phase, again, these are things that we can internally shape quickly, recommending that we start out with an emissions inventory. We need to see where we're at before we can decide our targets of where we want to reduce emissions. Secondly, to develop a prioritized list of actions that we would bring to the board for your consideration. And then third, to develop a scoping for the second phase of the work. And in that scoping, we would do outreach to the community through, well, we would use a consultant to issue a request for interest to find out the parties that are interested in being a part of this process, and also to conduct some engagement, some listening sessions out in the community to start hearing what are the priorities of the community. We would bring this back to the board, and we would also work with a consultant to start developing that scope of work for the second phase of work. To guide this work for this internal phase one, I would recommend that we develop an internal steering committee with representatives across the county to cover areas of fleet and facilities, waste management, public health, and other, and that we resource this appropriately. I'm recommending that we allocate $60,000 for a consultant to bring on expertise. We have some good local consultants who have done quite a bit of this work and would like to get them on board for helping the county through this process. Also recommending that we reclassify a position within the Waste Management Division. There's currently a vacancy there that we could reclassify into a project manager so that we can have a dedicated lead for this project, recognizing that we have existing, the people at this table and others have existing day jobs that we wouldn't have the time to devote to this, that we need somebody, you know, dedicated to this project. That position could also lead some of the bigger project management needs for large projects coming out of the Solid Waste Master Plan. For timing, recommending that we try to get a consultant on board within a month. There's a request for quotes or qualifications in the back of your packet that Angie and Michael helped put together, and that we launch with that to get a consultant on board within a month and then work through this phase one project in 6 to 9 months. And that we start the community outreach about halfway through that process where we start going through those listening sessions to get those priorities. For the phase two work, the community climate action plan, recommending that I return to you when we have more information, when we have a consultant on board with the expertise to help lead us through the process, and when we have the feedback from the community of what the priorities are for the community. I'm recommending that we utilize a demonstrated and tested framework for developing our climate action plan. There are some good models out there. There are bodies that specialize in this work. There's ICLEI, which is an association for local governments around the world working on sustainability, and they have guidance documents and templates that we could use. Also recommending that we establish an advisory committee with diverse stakeholders in the community to represent as we develop this work and make sure that we have equity interests as we're working through that. And that we've also adopt a set of guiding principles. And the United Nations has a set that they recommend for local climate action planning, and I'll read through their list, which I think are all great guiding principles that we may want to consider. That it should be ambitious, inclusive, fair, comprehensive and integrated, relevant, actionable, evidence-based, and transparent and verifiable. So those would be my goals for the plan. This is my proposal that's in the project, in your board packet that we've talked about at the county level that seems to be well supported, and I'd like to hear your feedback at this time.
Okay, I will start by just asking a question. One of the things that's concerning me about starting this work is how much of it should be aspirational for our community and the community we live in, this giant place called Lane County, and how much should it be actionable, to use the term from the United Nations. And I'm interested in all of your perspectives on this as to when we're told, for example, well, we can't do something because of a federal law, or we can't do something even up ahead of a federal law because of a treaty. how much of that should be part of this work versus getting down to actionable, what could a Lane County department do differently? I'd like to hear your perspective on that.
That's a tough question.
Yeah, that's why we
I
get
think-
to ask them up here. You get to answer them.
I think both of the parts of that are important. So in those guiding principles, so there's ambitious. I think it does need to be ambitious. This is a large global problem that isn't going to be fixed by minor tweaks to our internal county operations. So I do think it needs to be encompassing large, ambitious work that may be beyond our direct control, but at least we're trying to push and advocate in that direction. But also it needs to be actionable, like you said, so that we can at least do our part to the greatest extent that we can, because everyone's going to need to do their part to fix this problem. And we can't just say that Lane County's part, won't change the world and won't fix the problem. Yes, that's true, as Michael said, but yes, we need to do something. We all need to. So I think it's balancing that. And so that's, again, why that two-phased approach. We need to get working.
The other, some of you have responses to that.
Chair Sorensen, Commissioners, I would add to that, this is a great opportunity to have values reflected in our legislative agenda, to make sure that perhaps it's not actionable for us alone, but that we can advocate at the state and federal level. I think one of the things that Commissioner Burney has brought to the foreground is what are we doing with our investment dollars, and do our investment dollars reflect these values? We will not solve it alone, but we can certainly walk our talk through our investment portfolio. So I think there's quite a few elements that in and of themselves won't make a difference individually, but they will contribute to the larger, greater effort. And I think there's a lot of staff very excited to be included in this effort to see how creative we can be.
Well, I would just say, going with what Greg said about the legislative priorities, for some of these aspirational goals, if we're going to keep track of our progress, and let's just say, I don't know how we're going to do it, it's red, green, yellow type of situation if we're advocating for something that we really have no control over, that's green, because we can't really do anything about it. So let's say that we've did all we can do in that space, and now we need to move forward on the items that we can actively and take care of ourselves. So I don't think that we should ignore those aspirational goals. They should be there, but let's not waste a lot of time on them if we're never going to get anywhere, because there's a lot of stuff we can fix here that we should concentrate on.
The only thing I would add is that data tells a really powerful story. So by us just conducting the first and second phase, we know something, and we can internally plan for that. It tells a powerful story to our community. It says that we're doing something internally to what we have direct control over. And then we have a lot of committed partners right now that are really focused on solutions to address climate change. Legislatively, I know the community's pretty up in arms with plastics, but that is another avenue for us to advocate for extended producer responsibility legislation. And I know that we can use that as a leveraging tool to kind of stake our claim at a state level.
Thank you. That's really helpful, Commissioner Burney.
Oh, I'll go after Commissioner.
I'll be probably far more brief. I just have a couple of flags to raise. Not flags to raise.
Is that what you're saying?
I'll give you a few softballs to swing at. How's that sound? No, I'm really excited about moving forward with this, and to see the assembled expertise that we have in front of us. I don't know why it should have come as a surprise to me, but it does a little bit come as a surprise to hear your listing of the credentials that you have, Mr. Hurley, between you, the master's degrees that you share, that you all have clearly an interest in this that precedes your participation at the table today, and you're bringing that along with you. And along with that, I know that we do have some best management practices that we are engaging in, certainly not everything that we can do. But I think a part of our what you say is a powerful story to tell the community. I love that statement because it is a powerful story to tell the community that we are interested, we're engaged, we're involved, and we're seeking ways to participate for the future and to move into the future. But to inventory the things that we are already doing that we can either enhance or continue doing, I think is an important message to send to the community. And the only other thing, the flag that I will raise is that you mentioned that there's nothing much that we can do as far as directing cities as a Board of County Commissioners because they have their internal organization. Well, there is another body that we are, and that is we are the Board of Health. And as the Board of Health, we have in some ways a greater jurisdiction than as the Board of County Commissioners. In some ways we can overrule, or not overrule, but prescribe what happens inside of cities for the entire county. So as we move forward with our climate action plan, the fact that we can it's to remember that we can not only act as a Board of Commissioners, but we can act as a Board of Health when it is appropriate, when it's designated appropriate, and when it is defensible as a Board of Health action. I'm looking forward to the work because clearly you guys are on the ground, you hit the ground running. You know, that's not, you're not saying, well, what do we do now? You already have a plan in place to move us forward. I like your description of phase one. I like that phase two will begin when many of the things, including having a consultant on board, perhaps having the committees formed, will be in place before phase two starts. So your deliberative approach to it is admirable, and I am looking forward to the work for the future. So thanks very much for this presentation. That was short, honestly. Thank you.
That's the politest way that anyone has ever told me that I'm verbose. First, I would like to say that I don't mean this quite as in a confrontational way. My concern is not how much is aspirational and how much is actionable. My concern is we haven't begun this years ago, number one. Number two, as the cultural anthropologist and political activist with whom I actually had an incredible relationship, Margaret Mead, said, if not now, when? And if not us, who? In Googling who, I've found that there are hundreds of other cities and counties that have embarked upon this, and the templates and what have you are. So I'm delighted this is occurring, and I'm going to suggest to you, to us, that we are actually experiencing a very serendipitous moment. It is a moment where the County Board of Commissioners seems fairly strongly united behind a desire to finally move in this direction. It's a moment where we learn of the incredible expertise that's been preparing without knowing that you would be working for the county at this particular moment, and we would be doing this, that is assembled before us, that actually has the capacity, I believe, to do some wonderful things. And my experience is that if we don't shoot for the stars, we'll never get to the top of the mountain or the hill. So as it relates to aspirational, if we as a County Board of Commissioners can aspire to 0 deaths on roads in Lane County, we can certainly aspire to 0 carbon emissions in the atmosphere in Lane County. Now, how one pragmatically gets from here to there, I believe, is embodied in Mr. Hurley's proposal, which I strongly support. Flesh, as I understand it, will be garnered along the way. Along the way, it is an attempt to put structure on something that I predict will have a tremendous amount of citizen involvement and public interest. And so to have the structure, which I think you're saying you want to be very careful about building in the correct way, not overpromise, but develop capacity, do what we can over all the variables we have control over, understanding that what we don't have control over, you know, we will move forward. That's the aspiration part, and we will develop relationships. I couldn't be more delighted with the board and with the staff, and I just thank you so much. This is going to be such a wonderful journey that we're about to embark on.
Who said the best time to plant the tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is today?
Yes, sir. That's right.
I'm not as eloquent as Joe here, but I at least want to put my 2 cents in. I'm extremely excited about all the energy internally regarding the subject. I just feel like there are so many skills that you all have and all the people you have in mind that could participate that we are now going to be able to put to use on such a massively important issue in our community and in our world. So I'm excited that we're embarking on this. That said, I'd also like to see this incorporated into our strategic plan for the county. We are going to be talking about that here soon. And I think this is a large enough issue where we have enough energy and interest that that should elevate on our strategic plan for the coming year, and incorporating that into our legislative committee and what we want to pursue in the next biennium. I'm personally really interested in product stewardship. And Angie, I believe you had a different name for it, so I'm going to have to learn that other name.
EPR, Extended
EPR.
Producer Responsibility.
Yes, so it's going to take me a while to probably transfer that, that phrase over.
Think of paint care. Think of the system that was created for paint care. So now you take that and manufacturers bear the burden.
Exactly.
Of disposing of that.
Yep. And that's what conceptually I've had in my working past was product stewardship. So they're responsible for the end user of their product, or at least the shell of their product. I would be really interested in pursuing that and supporting that, not only on a legislative side for a state, but how we can do that here in the county. I know that's just one little sliver of an aspect of the entire subject, and I don't pretend to be an expert in this particular subject. I really like the recycling part and the product stewardship part, but I'm so interested in learning all the aspects as they unfold in the coming year.
I have a couple of specific questions. One would be, we often hear critics of having the government play a role in doing something about climate change to, well, like many things, it could be just the private sector will adapt. So if it gets too hot in Phoenix, and by the way, I did check, it's 111 in Phoenix today, I'd be a climate refugee if I was having to live in that. But we often hear that, well, it'll be the private sector that will handle that. In other words, if it gets too hot in Phoenix, maybe people will move to Oregon. So we didn't need to change any government policy for that to occur. Just when people reach a certain level of intolerance to that kind of climate, then they'll move. Maybe there's something to be said for that, but I kind of view this as more, let's get more aggressive and even think of this as some of our entrepreneurial edge, some of our advantage of being a community that could be a place where people would want to live. And we think of this not in terms of a negative thing, oh, how are we going to accommodate all these people, but rather, wouldn't it be great if there were so many people that would appreciate wanting to live in a community like this? To me, that would be the entrepreneurial component, but it could also be different products that might emerge from the unique physical environment. And one of those products would be carbon storage and the vast amount of biomass that's in Lane County that, yes, it is currently mostly owned by the Forest Service or the timber industry, but it's a resource that if we play a leadership role could well be something that in the future could be quite an entrepreneurial activity, especially if the world is trying to figure out how to sequester more carbon faster, and we may well be in the proper place. So I just don't want to lose that aspirational component of this effort. Do I want to make sure that we're doing everything we can within our own, frame of reference of work? Yeah, of course. And I think that's the actionable part. But I do think there is an aspirational part. Another thing I'm interested in is hearing a little bit more about different ways or methods of involving the public. We have differing levels of interest on the part of the public. How is this going to affect me negatively? You kind of start off with a fear-based approach, or more positively, we've got we've got real experts in this community, not just the three of you, but lots of people in this community that are really interested in this and know a lot about it and have spoken at international conferences and are leaders. And I want to know how to have appropriate levels of public engagement with the different types of people that we have. We have people that will come in and say, do something about climate change, and that'll be the extent of it. They want us to do something about climate change, and that'll be the extent of what their ask is. Other people are very specific. They want to know how their organization is going to interact with this process and how their advocacy is going to be heard by policymakers at Lane County. So I don't know if you have any remarks, Dan, on this topic, but I just want to make it clear that at least my view is we need to have maximum public engagement.
I would just say that we would bring a proposal back with that phase 2 work that would outline the community engagement strategies, but I think we need to hit a broad spectrum from town hall meetings to smaller focus groups to online participation surveys. 350 Eugene has a current carbon zero challenge, I forget the name of it, but trying to engage people in different ways on this process. So I'm not sure what that will look like, but we'll bring some expertise into that conversation when we talk about the second phase.
Good. Okay, Commissioner Buck.
I just forgot one thing, which is the great potential for economic development in this particular area. And I know that Commissioner Burney's been working very hard on going and traveling with you to different places to explore that. I'm hoping that that will come, something on the economic development side will kind of travel along our trajectory in this process to show, the community that we can incorporate it, and not only is it, good so we can live, but a win-win-win, it creates jobs, you're in a great environment, and it develops great economic opportunity for people in the community. And I don't know how that's going to be incorporated along the way, but I'd love to see that.
Now, as we move into your territory, I think one way to do that is part of the plan is simply to identify legislatively, economic development, the variety of aspects of county operations, what impacts as a result of this process, recommendations. I mean, as we move forward. I have nothing more to contribute. I'm delighted. I do have a question. Is any action, in our packet it says no action is needed, discussion only. You do not require action to move forward on the plan you shared with us?
I would just like your verbal direction if this looks like a good approach. And then we will issue the RFQ to start getting the consultant on board and reclassify that position. But those two, we can issue a contract at that level without the board's authority. It's a $60,000 contract, so not needing that specific direction.
You have my head nod.
Yeah, I think you've got pretty good support for that. When you do come back, I think as a symbol of our commitment to this subject, I'd love to have some kind of resolution where we, the board, are supporting efforts to combat climate change in our community. I don't know how everybody feels about that on the board, but that would be significant to me and to the community, I think.
Would be happy to bring that back if I think we need 3 head.
Well, one thing would be if you could tell us what jurisdictions belong to ICLEI, for example, in Oregon. Several years ago, I looked into this, and I think it was Eugene, Multnomah County, maybe Beaverton, Ashland, Bend came to mind, and Lane County was not a member of it, and efforts at the time were unsuccessful. So I would be interested in terms of what other organizations are out there. There's also a National Association of Counties breakout group on climate change. that Santa Clara County, California is head of, or one of their supervisors head of. So there are organizational elements to this as well, that if we're going to be involved in this, then there are other organizations that are trying to do the same kinds of things we're trying to do. And the partnerships with those organizations would be helpful.
There are several I think we could consider, and perhaps we could bring that back.
I think that should be part of what you bring back. Like, what else can we do? Because Commissioner Buck, just said, well, what else can we do in terms of a resolution to say we're working on this and we're behind it? I would like to sort of add to that by saying, well, there's other organizations like ours that are trying to do what they can do, and we'd like to be part of that. We can learn from them, and maybe, as we've seen with other things, they may eventually learn from us.
Thank you very much.
Okay, anything further from commissioners?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Farr?
Just to add, I think you've seen a level of enthusiasm from the board, across the board up here today, and it really is, I'm excited as we move forward. We do have an existing strategic plan, and as we look at the four points, the four strategies in our strategic plan, climate response can be involved, it can be a part of virtually all four across the board. It doesn't need its own, it could have its own call out, but it really is a part of our entire tactical addressing of the strategic plan. And I think I'm excited to see what we are doing. Commissioner Burney rightfully says, why didn't we start before? And the answer to that question was, well, while we didn't codify it before, we have been actually taking action, whether it be with our fleet or whether it be with our waste stream, whatever it may be, just to see what we have done and once again what we can make more robust. I'm looking forward to phase one moving into phase two. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll stay in touch, and we'll put that on our future work plan to check in with your work. Thank you. Okay, we are now down to item number 13A, Commissioner announcements. Are there any Commissioner announcements? Okay, seeing none.
Actually,
Oh,
I don't really need to stress this too much, but we discussed the bond this morning, and Greg, you touched on the fact that we do already have a placeholder on this, and we do already have staff working toward what is the discussion on the bond going to look like. That is in place, and I think that occurred starting in early July is when we put that, we had the ask from the board.
Chair Sorensen, Commissioner Farr, that is absolutely correct, and I was planning to cover that under review of assignments.
Then I will back off on any further.
okay, so let's move on to item 13B. Do we want to make any agenda team requests? Yes, I put this at this time in the meeting for a reason. Okay. Are there any? Commissioner Farr.
Well, it's actually just a flag for something that's already an agenda team request and actually has a September 10th discussion date, and that is September 24th discussion date, and that is our winter response to the housing crisis. We have a winter response that has gradually grown more robust over the last 6 or 7 years, to the point that 6 years ago we started addressing winter response sometime around the first week of November. Well, we're well ahead of that, and much of our response this year is going to be continuation of what we've already done. But in preparation for the September 24th meeting, we all need to be ready to look at what we're doing and how we can make adjustments to what we're doing already to enhance the winter response that we already have in place, as well as adding new elements. So it's going to be an interesting discussion September 24th, which is darn close to winter. It's the next season away from winter. By the time we get to September 24th, we're in the autumn already. So it's a little late, but if we're ready to go, then we can make it happen.
Okay.
I'd just add to that, when we put this on the calendar for next year, I think it would be good to bump it up so that it's not so close to winter, right? You said November 1st, it used to be when you first talked about it, now it's September 24th. it still feels incredibly late to me. So if we can bump that up a month or two for the next calendar year, I think we'd be in a much better position, especially as we're all learning all the different systems that's going on to counter our folks that are homeless during the wintertime, that we really take the time to thoroughly vet all of the different things that we're doing, and then find more ways to be more robust as we do every year.
Okay, any agenda team requests before we move on to work session requests?
I just really want to reiterate what the two commissioners already said. We got to reverse engineer this stuff. So if winter is approaching on X date, and I don't know how long it takes the county, depending upon what actions are given, my guess is we need in February or March to be talking about the next winter, but I don't know that. So I would just concur. I just want to reiterate the importance of that. Thank you.
Well, one thing we can do is we can just set up a work session on the status of winter preparation. And we can set that pretty much whenever we want. It might not be a very thorough, but at least it'll be a check-in. And that would be a way to advance it onto our list of work sessions. So I'm not aware that we have one specifically on that topic, or do we?
The Poverty and Homelessness Board and the Human Services Commission do discuss it throughout the winter and beginning in January, really. But to actually bring it to the board level, I think is a really important step.
Yeah. So maybe we can make that a agenda team request, and we can say we'd like to get a briefing, and that's what we're asking.
Well, that's what we're getting on September 24th. It just feels late.
Okay, and is that sufficient?
Well, we don't really have much time to change that right now.
Yeah, okay.
But in the future.
So in the future, maybe we can make this request, that we'd like to get a briefing on or about the beginning of summer. I'll just throw out the number, June 21, 2020. We'd like to get a briefing on winter preparations.
After budget.
On a Tuesday in June, late June.
Have Diana do that. Chair Sorensen, Commissioners, I do have County Council recommending that perhaps we close out the budget and perhaps the first meeting after your budget is approved, which would put that in the exact time frame.
Yeah, that's fine.
And Diana can
good.
calendar that date, so it comes back.
Yeah, okay, on a Tuesday, on a Tuesday. All right, I like our optimism that we're going to have winter. Okay, so now let's move on to item 13C. I've got two items. So the first one will be the logistics for the joint work session. We have the proponents of the ballot measures, we have the opponents of the ballot measures, and we have the county. What we had talked about in our agenda meeting was that Mr. Dingle would take point on the actual date and try to get the lawyers a date. Do we have a date? Has that been agreed to or mostly agreed to?
No, it has all been agreed to.
All been
in the
agreed
sense
to.
I've heard from all three of the external participants, and they are all fine with October 16th at 9 a.m.
Okay, so October 16, 9 a.m. is the date and time for the joint work session. What is remaining to be decided is kind of who goes first, who goes second, who goes third. My idea was that we give the proponents the opening salvo, and we give them, my original idea was 10 to 15 minutes. We then follow it by 15 minutes for all opponents, so that we have, as I understand it, two lawyers representing two different opponents.
Right, and what I was going to suggest to them was the same thing that, again, it's not original on my thought. I was in the Court of Appeals on last Tuesday, and rather than give them their choice, they could either yield, essentially split that 15 minutes in half, or one could yield it to the other person.
So
Just leave
they
it up
get
to them.
15 minutes. If they want to do it 7.5, 7.5, that's fine. If they just wanted to go back and forth in a colloquy consuming a total of 15 minutes, they get 15 minutes. Then the board will consume with questions to either the proponent's lawyers or the opponent's lawyers or our own legal counsel, the remaining 45 minutes. Is that,
I think that's what we talked about, and.
oh wait,
and-
that wouldn't be 15, that'd be 30 more minutes. Yeah.
And I wanted to remind the board, what I was going to do was, because I think I will need, I mentioned this morning, Mr. Meek submitted some material, which I'm responding to in writing, so we'll kind of go through the same process that we did the last time. I'll send it to the board, and then you can waive attorney-client privilege. But my thought is that I would let everyone know that they could submit materials in advance. I would encourage them to do it ahead of the regular schedule to give the board sufficient time to do it. So just so they understand that there's going to be, I envision this as being very, very specific and legal issue related as opposed to background. In other words, by the time we get to this work session, I will have submitted to you probably 35 pages or 40 pages worth of briefing. I think Mr. Meek's stuff is like 10 or 12 pages. And I don't know what Mr. Chamoff and Mr. Gary might submit, but I'm thinking that there is a lot of background there that doesn't need to be replowed.
Okay.
So that's what I was going to tell them, is that they were free to submit the information. And even though we let people do that like a week before, I was going to strongly urge that they do it more like 3 weeks before to give the board adequate time to review it.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess what I'm kind of envisioning is 15 minutes for the proponents, total of 15 minutes for the opponents, a total of 1 hour of discussion for a total of 1 hour and 30 minutes for the scheduling.
Because I really, at least the way I understood you wanted this work session, this really was for the board to have, the majority of the time would be to each member asking whichever party they have the question of,
Yeah,
a question, and have them answer it.
yeah, that's good. Any other comments? Commissioner Burney?
So it's built into that, you also?
I could, I really would let them go first, because again, my position is going to be completely, I'll probably, if the board would like, I can probably give like a very sort of succinct thing at the beginning, but I really feel like more of the time should be given to them to give their position, because again, I feel like I've done, by the time we get there,
Yeah.
you will have seen my position in writing. You've had an opportunity to read it. Obviously, I'll do whatever the board asks. I thought the majority of my time would be spent responding to questions from the board or to issues that they raise in their thing.
This may just be me, truly, but it feels to me like this is going to be several attorneys attorneying with each other. And if that's the case, since I'm not one.
Attorneying?
I've heard you talk about good lawyering, so
Lawyering, yeah.
Okay. At any rate, would it be appropriate to have some closing statements by each attorney, including county counsel? Because we're doing this at the request of people that have been feeling like they haven't been heard. And I just want them to hear what we're hearing as well as us to hear what they're saying. That's all.
Yeah, certainly one thing the board could do would be to do what the chair has outlined, and then at the conclusion of sort of the back and forth with the board and the questioning, give each group, like 3 minutes or whatever to do a brief summary of their position in response to the things that are raised. That'd be fine.
That's the reason we're discussing this, is to get different ideas on how to do it. And, we could, at the end, we could say, okay, we want to have like a closing comments from the, to maybe keep it simple, we would just say 5 minutes, and we'll have 5 minutes for the proponents and 5 minutes for the opponents.
For the boards, and I know Commissioner Sorensen knows this, it is pretty, I mean, you know, arguing a case in front of the Court of Appeals, you get 15 minutes and you can reserve up to like 3 minutes for rebuttal. So just so you understand, I mean, that's, lawyers are oftentimes at that level forced to, but again, it's the same sort of thing. By the time you get to the Court of Appeals, both sides have submitted briefs that have outlined all the issues, and depending on the panel you get, you may not get to say very much. You may just spend your time answering questions. So this is actually, the time we're offering, I think, is a fair comparison to what you do in terms of an appellate argument.
So how do the commissioners feel about it? I personally, I'd be willing to go along with that suggestion. You are correct that this is their opportunity to you know, have that interaction with us, and they may also want to make a different statement or slightly different comments at the end after they've heard the questions to make a final, yeah. So, okay, how about this? Then I'm going to try to lay this out and see if people agree. We would start out with a 15-minute opening from the opponents, excuse me, for the proponents. We would
be Mr. Meek.
We would follow that with a total of 15 minutes, split any way they wish among any opponents or acknowledged opponents, followed by a board discussion, followed by a 5-minute closing by the proponents, followed by a 5-minute closing of the opponents. And that's kind of how I would split it.
And I assume 5 minutes from county council too, if I.
Yeah.
That was kind of what I was.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. So that means there's less time for questions. We could extend the whole work session from 90 minutes to 2 hours. That's another call of the commissioners.
I was going to suggest, when I tell them, just so they would know, I was going to say just plan on, 9 to 12. Not saying that it's going to go that long, but they could just plan their morning. Because it just depends. I think you may decide once the conversation gets going and the colloquy back and forth, it may go past
The
60
90
minutes. We might, so I was just going to tell them, just plan on
2 hours.
I was going to say the morning, and then that way they're covered.
All right. That sounds good. And then tell them about the 5 minutes and the 15 minutes.
What I'll do is I will, when I send them the email, I'll CC the board on it, but I will lay out all that, and I didn't see anyone disagree with me that although you could submit the material a week ahead of time, your preference would be the sooner the better for the written material from the folks. The more time you have to review, the better, okay.
I used to work with a woman who was the attorney in a very famous case called Roe versus Wade, and one of the things she was explaining was that the Supreme Court allowed 5 extra minutes on that case. So she got 25 minutes instead of 20 minutes. So that's a typical U.S. Supreme Court argument time.
Okay.
That case was also brought back for re-argument. A lot of people don't know that. It was brought back for re-argument, and one of the re-argument questions was, does the readmission date of the state of Texas have any bearing on this case? So, because Texas, was readmitted to the Union, and whether or not the 14th Amendment would apply. All right, so we got that done. Now, moving on to the housing bond thing, we do have on our work schedule that the agenda team went over today, we have the work session. Request was made to have staff work on Mr. Eisenbach, with Mr. Eisenbach to discuss his proposal for a housing bond. The request was for HHS, budget, finance, together with Better Housing Together and anyone else involved in housing to look into what this bond proposal actually is, and should Lane County be looking into further of this option. Staff assigned are Gaffney, Manella, Moody, and Tintle. We have not scheduled, just for the board's knowledge, we have not scheduled this work session yet because we have not heard back from Gaffney, Manella, Moody, and Tintle, but they are all working on it. And we're planning on having them come in and do a work session. For those of you following this, we have a color-coded system now. Green means we've scheduled a work session. Yellow means that it's been assigned, but we haven't scheduled it. And red means we haven't done it. So this is in the yellow category, and it's fifth up on the list of work sessions to be scheduled. So if there's any more feedback on what to do, I added one piece this morning, that what polling is available. The Portland polling that was done on their bond measure would be an obvious one that I'd love to know more about in terms of what people supported. But other than that, it's going to be a work session where we all get to ask our questions and decide whether we want to move forward or not. So anything further on that from the board? Okay. Then any other work session requests that have not yet made it into the system? Seeing none, we are done with that. We're now ready to move on to item 14, the review of assignments, and then we're still on schedule to have our executive at 4 o'clock.
Chair Sorensen, I actually, seeing where we were time-wise, I contacted Ms. Perlow, and she indicated she could be available sooner. I'm just supposed to text her assistant, Ms. Pershern, when we adjourn. So.
Okay. What's your preference then? Do you want to break for a while after Greg helps us with the review of assignments, or do you want us to 10 minutes? You want to break for 10 minutes at least? Okay. So we could do that. How about 10 till, move it up 10 minutes?
Move it up more than that. If we have a break, after we finish up here, a break for 10 minutes and then.
That's what I was going to suggest. As soon as you finish here, I would just say.
She can be there in 10 minutes?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll see.
All right, let's do it that way. That sounds good. I won't read the procedural rules for the
exec session.
For the exec session yet, because I think we should do item 14 first.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Chair Sorensen, Commissioners, and most of all, Ms. Jones, please be generous with me as I recapture the day. Sir, you did a fine job of reviewing both the ballot measure piece, which is now scheduled for October 16th at 9 o'clock, and if we cannot confirm Matthew Knight Arena for that, we will have that here in Harris Hall. We also are working towards a work session on the housing bond measure. I have also heard today that you are looking in attachment with the fatal crash investigation, that you would like research done on photo enforcement, and that there was at least head nods. You want to jump in on this?
Yeah, I was actually going to update the board. There are two separate programs, and they are authorized only for cities and ODOT in construction zones. They can contract with the state police or one of the 10 cities that have been authorized to do it. There are two different programs, but they're only currently authorized for cities and, like I said, Department of Transportation.
All right. There was also some interest at that point getting that legislative clarity, and I wasn't sure if we wanted to look at that as an issue to take to the legislative committee.
That should go to the legislative committee.
Okay. So I'm seeing 3 head nods on that.
Yep.
Let's see, in terms of the Climate Action Plan Phase 1, we are moving forward with that. I've heard that should be included incorporated into the strategic plan, that too should be going to the legislative committee, and that you are also looking for, attached to Phase 2, commission action, be it a resolution or a joining of partnerships, depending on what Phase 1 reveals, but that you are looking for affirmative action, engaging the board in a statement or participation in climate action plan efforts. And then the final thing I have is the winter response coordination that we will we should look towards more regular connectivity to that, and I did hear some mention of after-action work so that there's a spring update, but you're truly looking for a work session for the first meeting following budget approval in the summer, so that we are no longer surprised that winter comes around yet again.
Very good.
Those are the items I had. Am I missing?
Okay, are there any commissioners that have any comments on that? Has Greg captured that? I believe so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That concludes item 14. We're now moving on to item 15. At this time, the Board of County Commissioners will meet in executive session to consult with counsel regarding the rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. This executive session is held pursuant to RS 192.6602H, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision will be made and may be made in executive session. We reserve the right to come back out into public session should the need arise. We'll be in recess for 10 minutes, or let's say 4:40, approximately 10 minutes, 4:40 p.m., and we'll be in recess till 4:40. We'll reconvene in the Board of Commissioners conference room at 4:40 p.m. Thank you.